Yo, what up, everybody? It's Steel Stewart. Today is another Metagore Monday. I figure for the month of August, I am going to kind of focus more on world building for a couple videos. I know whenever I first started this channel about 2 years ago or so, I had done a video about world building, and I figured I'd kind of retouch on that. And today, since it's Metagore Monday and it focuses more on my Metagore series, I figure I would kind of talk about a particular aspect of my world building for my Metagore series, which is the Blue Fangs. The Blue Fangs is like a cult type political group contrived in Metagore and has since kind of blossomed out across some of the different regions of Metagore as well as other lands of the Abyss. So that's just kind of what I want to talk about today, kind of give you a little bit more history and backstory. I have most of this information up, if not all of it, up on my websites and a blog back early last year, whenever I was kind of posting some histories. And it's kind of very, this year, this happened, this year, that happened. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but I'm going to go through more what pertains to the Blue Fangs in a sense, and their interaction with the other regions in Metagore. There's more to them than just what I'm going to, reveal or talk about today. And as well as it's something that's not really mentioned too much in the first book. It is mentioned, I think, on 2 occasions that Caprin is a Blue Fang member, and that's the reason why he is in power. But it's not really talked about who the Blue Fangs are or anything like that. That's how they work. In the second book, there is more talk about it and more focus on the Blue Fangs and some of the other members of the group, not just Caprin, but who some of the other members are, which are people that from the first book. You just didn't know they was Blue Fangs, and it kind of carries on throughout the series. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. So let's get into it. And a little information about this before I get into it too much. In my world, different regions have different timelines. Here we have like a BC and AD, before Christ, and whatever that Latin or whatever words are, that means year of the Lord or whatever. But we have like 10,000 BC, or we're living in 2020 AD type ordeal. So that's different from them. They have a PM and an AM, which is kind of confusing since that's what we use for time, but it's for prior of the Metagore Compression Acts or pre-Metagore Compression Act, and then after the Metagore Compression Act. So anything that's PM is older, and that is before Metagore became one kingdom as a whole, and it was still 6 separate kingdoms. And then AM is after they've been unified, which I think most of this will probably be PM. I'm not sure. I'll be looking off of my computer or wherever at my notes and stuff as I'm going. So yeah. So the Blue Fangs were formed in 2454 PM. It was originally a group of 8 political figures, not necessarily like kings and queens or whatever, but some of the understudies in a sense. And their sole intention was to eliminate their king. Their king he had made some bad choices. He had, wasn't the best person, as well as he was very brutal and very controlling. Things had to be done his way. And then he went overboard with the punishment, as in a lot of cases. There's one time where the king had received word that somebody didn't like him and had said something along the lines, I wish he would die. He took that as a threat, and he wasn't sure exactly who it was. He just knew the village that they lived in. So he had the entire village burnt down and destroyed and people just slaughtered, just kind of try to protect himself. That's how overboard he went. So this group of 8 different figures that came together as the Blue Fangs decided to have their king dealt with, whatever they thought it would be in their best interest if they had a different king. So they decided to devise a plan to kill him. And it took them about 7 years to try to figure out, exactly how they was going to go about this whole ordeal. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to kill our king, and then the next day go do it. They sat and actually plotted, figured out his actual routine, try to weasel their way into being able to get closer so they could have more control over certain things. And it took them about 7 years. And that time period in the history of Metagore is known as the 7-Year Uprising. So 7 years later, in 24:47 p.m., they actually, a couple members actually snuck in while the king was taking a bath and drowned him. That was their brilliant plan, was just to drown him. But it worked. They drowned him in his own tub in his room. He died and changed his name from King Nises the Bold, which was like a nickname they gave him since, he was so bold with his actions, to King Nises the Drowner, since that's how he died. Later, after that same year, Garaka, which was the leader of the Blue Fangs, he was kind of the one that kind of put it all together and was like the head of the cult. He had weaseled his way within those 7 years to get closer to King Nises, and is actually one of the people that actually drowned him. And with weaseling his way through the rankings and kind of getting closer to him, he became king after Nises' death. After that whole ordeal of him drowning him and becoming king, there were some stipulations and rumors kind of starting to rise and trying to figure out who drowned their king and this and that. So that cult, known as the Blue Fangs, decided to pin the murder on the Duke. They didn't like the Duke. The Duke was kind of still very similar to the old king and this and that. So they pinned the murder on him. And then after some trials and stuff like that, they actually succeeded in imprisoning the former Duke and replaced him with one of the members of the Blue Fangs. So they was trying to keep everything, within themselves. They was a group and they wanted to have the power, as well as to kind of get rid of these others. But, they wanted to help the other members of the group also to obtain power. So one of the other members became Duke, and then the former Duke was in a jail. And then they later that same year told the congregation, the country or the kingdom or whatever, of Metagore, that their Duke is the one that had done it, and that the Blue Fangs, which had already kind of started coming up in rumors that there was this cult and stuff, but he painted it as the Blue Fangs were the people that actually discovered that the Duke had drowned him or whatever, and that they wasn't really a bad cult. They was more like the saviors of Metagore and stuff. And then about another 26 years later, in 24:18 p.m., King Graka decided to change the banner of the kingdom from a banner with a trigon, which is a kind of like a stingray or a manta ray type of fantasy creature that's in my world. Since they live in the swamps and they're very heavily influenced by fishing and other aquatic things. And that had been their banner for their kingdom, whatever. And he changed it from that to a picture of a serpent that was blue, since Blue Fangs, as well as they have a Hydra that kind of has been lurking around the kingdom for a while at that point. So they kind of referenced that in a sense, as well as like death worms and stuff. So they decided to do a serpent head and make it blue. In 1987 p.m., King Thrawn, which was also a member of the Blue Fangs or a descendant of the original Blue Fangs, sends another member of Blue Fangs that doesn't have actual power, named Kalar the Strong, because he's a brute in size and very aggressive. And he sends him to Rigdale, which is Braham now in my story of my Metagore series. And he sends him up there to kind of spy on the king and to eventually assassinate the king Abraham. And at that point, they are trying to spread their power. They basically, by this point, since it had been like 400, 500 years since they already took over Metagore, they've got pretty good grasp on it. They want to expand to the other kingdoms of Metagore, and then eventually, like I said, to the other lands of the Abyss. So at this point, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to spy on the Riglan king, have him killed, and kind of weasel their way through their political system into becoming a person of power. After that happened, and they kill the king of Rigdale, Kalar, the person that got sent up there to kill him, got arrested and was in prison. Later, King Thrawn sends Otello up there, which is another Blue Fang member, and he actually weasels his way and becomes the king over Rigdale, and he releases Kalar and sends him back to Metzalir. At 9:63 p.m., the king of Metzalir sends people over to Alberon to cross the Diamond River and into the kingdom of Alberon to try to overthrow that government. So by this point, they've already got Metzalir, they've got Braham or Rigdale at that point, and now they're trying to expand to Alberon. So they send a group of people over there. They kind of migrate, and they are kind of welcomed. People just thinking it's travelers, people migrating over there, and eventually they hunt down one of their gods, because they have two gods in Alberon at that point, and they hunt down one of them and kill it, which obviously is going to piss off some people. And then there's a war kind of fought over that whole ordeal, which Alberon is actually the victor of that. Later on in the whole ordeal, some more people actually migrate back over, this time peacefully. They don't try to start any uprisings or anything like that, but they just kind of migrate peacefully, start mating with some of their locals and stuff, and eventually produce offspring to try to weasel their way up through the rankings, since they are actually part Alberian. And that's mostly what I have for my history on my website. Like I said, it's in a blog on my website. There's more stuff to it, so I just haven't posted or whatever, like them expanding to different kingdoms like beyond Metagore, as well as in Citylene and Ringwood and Centuries and whatever, all their influences on it as well. Basically, how they proceed to continue and grow as a cult. Originally, it was 8 people. At first, it was just going to be those 8 people. That was just their main goal, was to get rid of King Nises. And then later, they decided to start actually, trying to obtain the power. And they became power hungry. And then it wasn't until about the time one of them was about to die, grew old and was going to die. And then he didn't want to give up that power. So he lets one of his children become a Blue Fang member. He inducts them and kind of starts showing them. And then as time went on, they began to bring their children into the cult, in a sense, once they became a certain age. They usually only pick their oldest. They didn't want like multiple ones. They still want to kind of be small, because once you get too many chefs in the kitchen, you know how that goes. So they try to keep, basically it started with 8. They wanted it to be 8. And then, as generations overlapped and stuff, it kind of grew a little bit. Eventually, whenever they took over Ringwood, one of the lords over there, he didn't produce any heirs, and he was trying to get more political influences and stuff into the system, since most of the people he was actually associated with and having to work with were not part of the Blue Fangs, since they were not from Metzalir and hadn't been influenced or anything like that. So he kind of got rid of some of them, and some of them he kept, and then inducted all of them. So it did spread a little bit, but not a lot. And for the most part, it is still basically 8 family lines, lineages, as well as maybe a few from, when the dude in Brighthelm or Rigdale inducted in some Viscounts as some members of the Blue Fangs. So there is potentially, about 10 to 15 family lines, and that's about it. But it's spread out across all of the different lands of the Abyss, or so to say. Maybe not all of them, but they're trying to get there. My Metagore series, there's multiple kingdoms in Metagore influenced by the Blue Fangs or ruled by the Blue Fangs, which you learn as the series develops, so I don't want to really give that away or anything like that. As well as there's other kingdoms which are mentioned in the second book, or some of them are, like Aegea is led by that. One of the kingdoms from Lafir is led by a Blue Fang. There's some in Direfell, there's some in Penora, there's some, all these different places. So they have went from just wanting to take out their king and try to elect someone that they thought would be better, to wanting to rule the kingdom themselves, to wanting to rule their continent, to wanting to rule the world, in a sense. So they are very power hungry, and once you kind of find out who some of them are, you'll be like, yeah, I could totally tell them, because they are very power hungry characters. Not every Blue Fang member is power hungry. There's even some that, you know, they're like, well, I don't really classify myself as a Blue Fang. It's not something I wanted, you know. I was abducted into it, you know. My parent, or whatever, one of my parents was a member of it, and, you know, I was the oldest or the only child, and, you know, they passed it on to me. I don't really care for it, but yeah, that's where I'm at. So yeah. But that is the Blue Fangs. I hope y'all enjoy this or whatever. It wasn't too boring for y'all or anything. I enjoyed it. It's probably one of the more in-depth things I've kind of went into with my world building, as in, you know, political systems and stuff. And like I said, that's not even all of it. There's a lot. I even have a spreadsheet on my computer that has all 8 original, and then like all their lineages and where it's kind of branched out and this and that. So yeah, I kind of went pretty in depth to that. But yeah, that's about it. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Hit that like button if you did, dislike if you didn't, whatever. Hit that subscribe button if you're not, you know, ring that bell so you know when I upload, which is typically every Monday. Now and then I might do a bonus one on a Thursday or something. My debut novel, The Battle for Metagore, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books Depository, whatever, as well as the audiobook is available on iTunes, Audible, whatever, you know. All those links are down below. You can go check those out. I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, a Patreon where you can support me for $1 a month, a website, which, like I said, I have a blog up on there with some of the history from the different kingdoms of Metagore. I got the one from Metagore, I got some from Rigdale, whatever. Link to my website's down there. You can go click around, find it. I have a newsletter where you can sign up and get, you know, a monthly newsletter, kind of let you know where I'm at in my writing process and this and that. So yeah, that's about it. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Peace out. Yoli. Everybody.